My name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is Discerning What is True. I'm going to be reading from a piece of work that was done by Manny P. Hall to his students many years ago, probably in the late 20s and early 30s. This is the definitions in philosophy. And so I'm going to be reading from this today. Hope everyone is doing well. And let's get into it right now. Hold on just a second. So it's just simply called Definitions in Philosophy. It's not that long, but there's some good quotes in here to share, okay, and expressing the deeper thoughts here. We live in a modern age. In fact, we actually live in a postmodern age, to be honest with you. This is not his words, but my words. We live in a modern and postmodern age that basically people scoff at this type of thinking because they think they're much more aware of things, but they don't have a foundation, you see. And so if you don't understand philosophy, you don't understand how to think, how to put things together. And there are many people poo-poo on what I call logic and say, well, this, it's up the head, the brain. We need to be more people, what you call the heart. Well, I'm not disagreeing with that in some ways, but I would say simply is that the problem simply is that the whole pendulum is swung to the point of emotions in the heart, and there's nothing left. That's what I would say. Because there's nobody even thinks anymore, much less reads anything, you see. So here's the beginning of the book, a little share of it, that is. To appreciate the scope and value of philosophy and its superiority over every other branch of learning, it seems appropriate to consider briefly the opinions of learned men relative to the importance and dignity of this noblest of human institutions. The quotations which follow are for the most part verbatim, but in a few cases we have slightly condensed the original statements, in no way, however, adding to or altering their meaning. According to Hume, Hume, a philosopher, be a philosopher, but amidst all your philosophy, be still a man. Continue. Learning should never separate a man from his world, nor cause him to feel himself superior to others. Rather, it should bring him closer to the heart of mankind and bestow upon his soul a realization of the dignity of all life and the identity of all creatures. Cicero, philosophy, quote, philosophy, right defined, is nothing but the love of wisdom. The soul ultimately disappointed in human relationships must turn from its attachments to outward forms and bestow its affections upon those imperishable truths which alone can satisfy man's yearnings. Another quote from a gentleman named Southey. Philosophy is of two kinds, that which relates to conduct and that which relates to knowledge. The first teaches us to value all things at their true worth, to be contented with little, modest in prosperity, patient in trouble, equal-minded in all times. He teaches us our duty to our neighbor and ourselves, but it is also he who pursues both that is the true philosopher. The more he knows, the more he is desirous of knowing, and yet the further he advances in knowledge, the better he understands how little he can attain, and the more deeply he feels that God alone can satisfy the infinite desires of the immortal soul. To understand this is the height and perfection of philosophy. That's a quote. Continue. From the definition, it becomes apparent that sacred and secular knowledge are but the aspects of our divine institution. True philosophy is not satisfied to reason only upon mortal concerns, but rises to the loftier speculation intent upon discovering not only the law, but the maker of the law. Quote, Guilford, divine philosophy, by whose pure light we first distinguish, then pursue the right, thy power the breast from every error frees, and weaves and all its vices by degrees. It's most fitting that a definition of philosophy should come to us in verse, for for as science is the process of living, so philosophy in the poetry of evidence. Hold on just a second here. Philosophy is the poetry of existence. By the perception of divine realities, we come finally to the rhyme all dissonance lines of life. Epicurus, quote, all philosophy lies in two words, sustain and abstain. So you sustain and you abstain. So you do things that you continue to pursue in rightness, and then you abstain for things that basically are wrong thinking. The wise man sustains his reason by feeding it upon a sufficient diet of thoughts. He abstains from that which will bring sickness to his mind by eliminating from his thinking and living all thoughts and actions which are unreasonable and destructive. Quote from Coleridge. In other words, in wonder all philosophy began. In wonder it ends, and admiration fills up the interspace, you see. But the first is the wonder of ignorance. The last is the parent of adoration. Quote, only the philosopher possesses the power of intellectual or intelligent appreciation. To the wise man, the wisdom of the universe becomes apparent. From the intelligent contemplation of existence arises a full realization of the perfection of that parent clause upon which all creation hangs. Another quote from Cicero. To study philosophy is nothing but to prepare oneself to die. That's a brilliant quote. I'll say that again. Cicero. To study philosophy is nothing but to prepare oneself to die. Quote, we may face the small issues of the day with ignorance and still preserve some small illusion of security. But in the presence of that great transition, which is the inevitable fate of all men, our only security lies in some adequate appreciation of the universe and its plan. Quarles, this is a quote from Quarles. Make philosophy the journey. How wise was that old imbecile writer when he perceived that life is a journey in wisdom, actions and experience and knowledge and truth, the whole purpose of our being. Epictetus, quote, the first business of philosophy is to part from self-conceit. A man who overestimates himself will underestimate his world. That's it's not even a quote, but that's from Manly P. Hall. To be humble is to admit the greatness of the universe. Out of a becoming humility arises the capacity for understanding. Max Muller, quote, philosophy is the knowledge of the limits of our knowledge. Quote, beyond the small circle of the known stretches in an eternity of uncertainties, of this the wise man is aware, but he has found security in the realization that beyond the eternities of the unknown again is the all-sufficient circumference of truth. Aristotle, quote, philosophy is the science which considers truth. You see, I wanted to say something else here. What we've had today is a fight between so-called the religion and science. So philosophy is not really even in this picture at all, so to speak. So that might think a little bit hard on that and might see why we're in such a mess today. Through Pilate's question remains unanswered, it is opinion of the wise that it is not unanswerable. The philosopher knows that there is but one way to discover truth, and that is to become truth. Philosophy is the science of becoming. Another quote, Buckward Linton, real philosophy seeks rather to solve than to deny. When the temple of wisdom is completed, much of its foundation will be made up of stones which sophists have rejected. There is no virtue in denying things as they are, but there is great virtue in discovering the reason for things as they are. Seneca, quote, "It is the bounty of nature that we live, but of philosophy that we live well, which is, in truth, a greater benefit than life itself." Quote, "To live without thinking is to descend to the state of the brute, but to crown life with intelligent action is to rise to the state of the Superman." Lavater, quote, "True philosophy is that which makes us to ourselves and to all about us better." Quote, "There is no merit in wisdom, there is no reward in knowledge, there is no comfort in faith, unless these things manifest outwardly, subduing the violence of action and bringing us to the harmless mode of existence." Another quote here from Nibbes, Nisbet. Quote, "The modern skeptical philosophy consists in believing everything but the truth, and exactly in proportion to the want of evidence, in making windows that shut out the light and passages that lead to nothing." End quote. Philosophy is nothing of philosophy is nothing if not noble. It is of no value unless it inclines the race to gentle virtue and noble action. To the measure that it fails to adore the one, serve the beautiful, and venerate the good, it fails to be philosophy. Voltaire, quote, "Discovery of what is true and the practice of that which is good are the two most important objects of philosophy." End quote. Thinking is not merely a exercising of the mind, it is a directing of the mind, only such as have organized thought to the accomplishment of some actual good are worthy to be denominated wise. Schasberg, quote, "The sum of philosophy is to learn what is just in society and beautiful in nature and the order of the world." End quote. Philosophy is founded upon vision and experience. Vision to perceive a noble end and experience to modulate man's natural impulses to overhasten the reformation of his world. Plutarch, quote, "Philosophy is the art of living." End quote. The arts are sciences of the beautiful, and its philosophy be the art of living. It must be the art of living beautifully. Schasberg, quote, "It is not a head merely, but a heart and resolution which completes the real philosopher." End quote. Reason arises not from intellect alone, but from the whole life. It is built upon wise thinking, generous feelings, and trained perception. Thoreau, quote, "To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, but to so love wisdom as to live according to its dictates." End quote. Philosophy is first living, then thinking. The philosopher's life is the only foundation upon which which an intelligent life can be built. Seneca, quote, "Philosophy is the art and law of life." End quote. By this, Seneca infers that philosophy is a rule of procedure, a code by the living of which man becomes worthy of happiness. John Selden, Selden, quote, "Philosophy is nothing but discretion." End quote. By discretion, we should understand that regulation of action of which all inverts are controlled, whether they be of the mind or of the body. He who is discreet and above an unreasonable act may be just termed wise. Cowley, quote, "To be a husbandman is but a retreat from the city. To be a philosopher from the world, or rather a retreat from the world as it is man's, to the world as it is God's." End quote. Yes, the world of God and the world of man are not separate by any distance other than the internal of understanding. As we grow wise, we depart not into some distant country, but rather we perceive the wise man's world emerging from the very ignorant world of our own sphere. Burke, quote, philosophy is queen of the arts and the daughter of heaven, end quote. The wisest of the sages have always maintained that wisdom had its beginning not among men, but among the gods from whom it descended for the salvation of humanity, end quote. Seneca, quote, philosophy is the health of the mind, end quote. It is normal for man that he should think well, but the blight of materialism has destroyed his birthright to wisdom. I want to say that again, folks. This is clear. This is what's really, this is not a quote, but this is from, from man himself. It is normal, it is normal for man that he should think well, but the blight of materialism has destroyed his birthright to wisdom. Correct. That's what people prefer, materialism. Materialism is something, an empty box, folks, that promises to enlighten you and make you happy. In reality, it doesn't. Never will. It is therefore necessary in this banal age for each man to struggle valiantly if he is to achieve to a normal and reasonable state. Quote from Londos, Londos, quote, a true philosopher is beyond the reach of fortune, end quote. To be truly wise, it is necessary to so love wisdom that there is no place left in the mind for anxieties concerning the temporal state. He who lives in desire for plenty or in the fear of loss has no right to call himself a philosopher. Sims, quote, philosophy is reasoned with the eyes of the soul, end quote. The intellect in itself can perceive nothing beyond that which is intellectual, but the intellect, when quickened with spiritual perception, bestows the philosopher's philosophy viewpoint. Hare, quote, Hare, the business of philosophy is to circumnavigate human nature, end quote. A philosopher must be fortified against himself. A philosophy is a conspiracy against the inadequacy of ourselves. By it, we are given courage to act more nobly than is natural to the human animal, is it? I'll say that again. A philosopher must be fortified, in other words, he stands true to what he believes is true in himself against himself. Philosophy is a conspiracy against the inadequacy of ourselves. By it, we are given courage to act more nobly than is natural to most human animals. Lamartine, quote, philosophy is the rational expression of genius, end quote. We may define genius as special aptitudes when special aptitudes is directed to the most important of all effects, the perfection of self. It is termed philosophy. A philosopher is a genius who has discovered the most perfected use of his abilities. John Koberg, I'll spell it for you, folks. I'm sorry, it looks like Joubert, quote, whence, whither, why, how? These questions cover all philosophy, quote, whence, God, whither, to God, why, law, how, wisdom. From the infinite to the infinite, we must proceed. The way of life is known only to the Maker, but from philosophy, we learn how to fit ourselves in the plan of life and to prepare ourselves for the final identity with our cause. Carlyle, quote, the philosopher is he to whom the highest has descended and the lowest has mounted up, who is the equal and kindly brother to all, end quote. Between heaven and earth stands the wise man. His earthly part has been raised to his highly perfection as the instrument of a divine purpose. The higher part, the soul itself, has become tolerant of the limitations of the body and wise in its own weaknesses, intolerant of the limitations of all other things. And that concludes my talk here from Manly P. Hall on the issue of definitions of philosophy. This was written back in, I think it's 19, by the Phoenix Press. It doesn't show an age. I thought it was 1928, somewhere there. It might have even before then. I thought it had a date here on the paper here. Let's see. No, it does not. But anyway, the little pamphlet is called Definitions in Philosophies. It gives support for what is being said here. And he is expressing this to us in a lot of ways that we need to be aware of, because frankly, we live in an age of modernity, and we also live in fact, we don't even live in an age, we live in a post-modernity world is what we live in now, which is really sad. And most people they don't even understand what this means. So anyway, thank you for being here. I appreciate you listening. And I hope that the words that has been said by the author here, Manly P. Hall, has some effect upon your life. Thank you. Have a good day.